Did you finish Terminator 2D No Fate thinking you understood it all? Well, buckle up, because today we're diving deep into the hidden details of the story that most players simply ignore. You know those small lines of dialogue, symbols, and quick scenes that seem like mere window dressing? Yeah, they completely change the meaning of the plot. And when you realize that, the game gains a whole new layer, almost as if you were playing an alternative version of the story. So stick around, because I'm going to show you 7 details in the story of No Fate that change everything. I'm Matthew, and the video starts right now. The subject of multiple endings locked by playthroughs is something that many people really overlook. And honestly, it's one of the things that surprised me most when I went back to replay the game. The first time, you beat it, see an ending that makes sense, close the basic arc, and think you're done. But you're not. Behind small choices and seemingly irrelevant actions, the game hides 3 completely different timelines. And what's most fascinating is that each one changes not only the fate of humanity, but also the very meaning of the phrase that gives the game its name: No Fate. The first time I finished it, I got the ending where you spare Dyson. This is the most canonical one, so to speak, the optimistic ending. It shows that a glimmer of hope exists, that human actions still carry weight, and that the cycle of destruction can be broken. It's almost as if the game is saying, there's still time. I came out of that run feeling good, almost heroic, thinking I had made the right choice. But later, when I saw the other possibilities, I realized the game was playing with something much deeper. On the second playthrough, I was more aggressive. I let the Terminator eliminate Dyson. The Resistance continues to fight. Skynet is still a threat, but there's a strange sense of stagnation. Nothing ends. Nothing is resolved. It feels like the eternal return of war, always on a loop. And that's when the game starts poking at you. Can fate really be changed? Or are we just delaying the inevitable? This ending casts a shadow over the idea of free will. And for the first time, I began to question if No Fate was truly a message of hope, or one of despair. But the third ending, when Sarah herself kills Dyson, is what truly changes everything. Humanity condemns itself. John dies, Skynet wins, and the cycle reaches its darkest point. And the craziest part is that it's not a secret ending by accident. The game wants you to work to see it, and when you finally do, the reward is a narrative shock. At that moment, you understand that No Fate isn't a promise of freedom, but a warning. The future is not guaranteed. It depends on every choice, even the most violent ones. This multiple ending design made me respect the game even more. It doesn't treat alternative endings as fan service, but as true temporal branches, consistent with the themes of the Terminator universe itself. It's as if each playthrough creates a new timeline, and the player becomes a piece of time travel, deciding the course of history as a traveler between possible futures. This fits perfectly with the franchise's concept of causality and time loops. What many people ignore is that the game never declares which of these endings is the true one. It's up to you to decide which version of humanity is yours. And that, to me, is the stroke of genius. While other games offer multiple endings as a replayability bonus, No Fate transforms this feature into a central part of the experience's philosophy. It makes you feel the weight of your choices, and by the time you realize everything, it's too late. Time, once again, has won. And you understand that the true No Fate is accepting that perhaps destiny had never disappeared at all. The choice regarding the T800's chip is, without a doubt, one of the most underrated details. It's one of those mechanics that seems small, almost cosmetic, but when you understand the narrative impact, you realize you were facing one of the most important decisions in the entire game. The detail here is that this choice doesn't even appear in the first playthrough. You need to beat the game at least once to unlock the option to reset or leave the chip intact. This fact alone makes the decision carry enormous weight because it symbolizes the T800's central dilemma. Is he a programmable machine, or an entity capable of evolving on its own. The first time I saw this option, I thought reset was the natural path. After all, resetting the chip is an attempt to preserve the learning side of the Terminator, the one that tries to understand humans, that slowly becomes humanized. But when you choose to leave the chip intact, the game changes tone drastically. The T-800 begins to act with cold, almost instinctive brutality, and the immediate assassination of Miles Dyson happens without any hesitation. It's a shock. Suddenly, that character who seemed to be developing empathy turns back into an instrument of Skynet, and the narrative twists into a much darker path. This choice creates what the game calls a familial rift, a temporal and emotional rupture that reverberates through every following scene. John, Sarah, and even the future rebels start reacting differently. And for those who explore deeper, there are even bonus scenes in the dystopian future showing the direct impact of this action. Dialogue lines change, certain missions disappear, and new ones emerge with a more hopeless tone. It's as if a single decision poisoned the entire temporal fabric. And all of this is only for those who paid attention, because most players breeze right past it. Narratively, the most brilliant part is how this simple choice redefines the Terminator's own arc. From learner, he becomes a relentless killer, and this completely changes his role in the time loop. It's no longer about a machine trying to comprehend humanity, it's about humanity failing to control its creation. A small gesture, leaving the chip as it is, and you erase all the evolution gained in the previous run. It's almost as if the game punishes you for wanting to see what would happen if. This mechanic also reinforces the main theme of no fate, determinism versus free will. The player becomes an accomplice to the ramifications, realizing that even when they believe they are in control, fate always seems to lean toward tragedy. You can reset the chip 1,000 times, but the nature of the T-800, and perhaps humanity, always ends up returning to destruction. This inevitable repetition is the true horror of the game. And the most interesting part is that this kind of design invites reflection. Terminator 2D, No Fate, isn't just about action and timelines. It makes you wonder what truly defines change. If the T-800 can revert to a monster because of a single choice, perhaps what makes him human was never the learning itself, but the capacity to choose and deal with the consequences. It's the kind of detail that turns a simple extra run into a deep dive into identity, morality, and destiny. The future war sections featuring John Connor are, for me, the hidden heart of the game. Most players don't even get to see these parts, and that's what makes them so fascinating. They only appear in the bad endings, and ironically, it's in these sections that the game shows the full picture of the struggle for survival. When you reach this point, the setting changes completely. The tense, present-day atmosphere of 1991 is gone, replaced by a future in ruins, with Los Angeles reduced to rubble. The sensation is brutal. Suddenly, the player is no longer trying to prevent the apocalypse, but living inside it. Controlling John Connor as the leader of the Resistance is a shock to the perspective. You finally inhabit that character who was always a distant figure in the story, the savior of the future. But here, he doesn't look like a hero. He looks tired, hardened, almost like a ghost. War surrounds you on all sides, and the level design reinforces this. The rubble consists of mazes of melted steel. Skynet drones patrol the skies, and the metallic sound of machine footsteps echoes constantly. The first time I faced the new T-8085s, I realized what the game wanted me to feel, the weight of what happens when you fail. These sections are almost a playable what if, an alternative timeline showing the direct consequences of your past decisions. And the cruelest part is how the game connects this back to the main narrative. At certain moments, there are optional scenes showing Sarah and John reuniting, or in some variations, never meeting at all. These are short but devastating moments. A simple dialogue in a destroyed setting can carry more emotion than any happy ending. It's the game reminding you that victory and failure are two sides of the same temporal cycle, in that every choice in the past creates a burden in the future. In terms of gameplay, these levels function almost like a bitter prize. The gameplay structure shifts to something more tactical and desperate. You command small resistance groups, set traps, dodge scans, and even when winning, you feel like you're only delaying the inevitable. The enemies, the T-8085s, are intelligent and adaptive, and the game makes it clear. Skynet learned from its mistakes. This role reversal, the player feeling firsthand what the machines learned from them, is pure brilliant narrative design. On the other hand, there's something poetic about how No Fate reserves these sections only for those who failed. The game doesn't punish you with a game over, but with knowledge. It makes you see the price of defeat. It's one of the most mature choices I've seen in a Terminator-inspired game. Instead of celebrating the invincible hero, it shows what happens when humanity loses. And this, paradoxically, makes the world feel more real than ever. When I finished one of these bad routes for the first time, I sat in silence for a long while. Seeing John Connor fighting until his last breath, trying to lead an unlikely army among ruins and machines, made me truly understand the weight of that phrase the game repeats. No fate. It's not just a motto, it's a curse and a reminder. The future war exists because at some point, someone failed, and now you are seeing the result. The explicit time loop in the endings of Terminator 2D is, without exaggeration, one of the most brilliant and yet subtle revelations in the entire game. Many people finish it once, see the epilogue, and simply interpret it as a symbolic ending. But those who return and experience the different outcomes realize that the game is showing you something much more disturbing. The cycle never ends. Every victory is just the beginning of a new start. The final cutscenes, when viewed in sequence, form a literal temporal circle, and it's almost impossible to notice this without replaying the game several times. The most striking detail is the scene where the T-800 is sent back to the past to protect young John. On the surface, it seems like just a tribute or a direct reference to the films. But what the game is actually saying is that these events have already happened and continue to happen infinitely. It's not just retelling the story of Terminator 2. It's showing the time machine of the narrative itself at work, resetting events after every ending, as if the timeline were stuck on a reel of tape that never ends. When I realized this, my mind was blown. Suddenly, all the endings, even the good ones, lost their sense of resolution. Every act of heroism, every sacrifice, all of it is part of an inevitable cycle that the game itself reinforces. The moment the time portal activates and the T-800 steps through is almost poetic. He is going to protect John, but we've seen this before, and we will see it again. The no fate of the title stops being a message of hope and becomes a desperate echo, a cruel irony. If time always repeats itself, then perhaps fate was never truly challenged. And the most intriguing thing is that the variations of each ending only reinforce this sense of temporal imprisonment. It doesn't matter if you saved Dyson, if Sarah fell into darkness, or if the Resistance fought to the end. The game ends with the same sending event. The difference is the tone. Sometimes there is hope, sometimes despair, sometimes pure apathy. It's almost as if the universe itself is trying to contain the changes. It adapts to your decisions, but always pulls the story back to the original point. This is inevitability translated into narrative design. The theme grows even stronger when you realize the game never shows what comes after the T-800 is sent. The camera cuts, leaves the portal flashing, and returns you to the title screen. It's a simple gesture, but full of meaning. The loop only ends when the player stops playing. As long as you continue, the cycle continues. This transforms the player into an accomplice to causality. It's as if the act of replaying is the fuel for Skynet itself. Every attempt to change the future ends up perpetuating the same destiny. And that's where No Fate shows its genius. It doesn't hand you hope or punishment, but a reflection on how time and will are interconnected. You want to believe. Your actions change something. But the game proves the opposite through its narrative loop. In the end, the greatest enemy isn't Skynet itself, but the structure of time that keeps it alive. And perhaps that is the coldest, most realistic message of the entire franchise. There is no fate, but perhaps there is no escape either. Dyson's death at the hands of Sarah is probably the most devastating and least discussed ending. It's one of those moments many people never see because it requires the reset chip and a specific replay to unlock. But when you get there, it's impossible to forget. In this sequence, Sarah does the unthinkable. She pulls the trigger and kills Miles Dyson with her own hands. No T-800 intervention, no hesitation. It's dry, heavy, and changes the tone of the game completely. That image of the Sarah who fights to protect her son's future dissolves instantly, replaced by a broken woman consumed by hatred, and that changes everything. The strength of this scene comes exactly from the contrast. Throughout the game, Sarah is guided by an almost maternal purpose, to stop the rise of Skynet to ensure John's survival. But in this ending, that purpose turns into blindness. By killing Dyson alone, she breaks not only the technological cycle, but also the emotional bond that sustained the story. The T-800 becomes obsolete, John flees from her, and the player feels it. The family that was the heart of the resistance disintegrates before your eyes. There is no redemption, only the void of guilt. This choice leads to one of the cruelest consequences in the whole game. John dies in the future, and the T-800 never existed to save him. The narrative weight of this is brutal. The cutscenes showing the post-apocalyptic future without the T-800 are cold, almost silent. No soundtrack, no glory, just ruins and echoes of something that could have been avoided. The game doesn't need to say anything, it just shows you. It's a world without the link between man and machine, without compassion, without learning. A future condemned by the most human decision possible, acting on emotion. And what's most interesting is how this ending completely inverts Sarah's archetype of heroism. Throughout the franchise, and even the game itself, she is presented as a symbol of strength and sacrifice. But here, she becomes the catalyst for destruction. Her heroism turns into tragedy. It's almost a metaphor for how fanaticism about saving the future can end up destroying the present. The Sarah of No Fate wanted to protect John, and ended up erasing the very meaning of her mission. The game makes sure never to glamorize this moment. It is dirty, uncomfortable, and all too human. The craziest thing is that this ending is invisible on the canonical route. If you play the right way, you never see this happen. And that's where the brilliance of the narrative design lies. The game hides its most tragic ending precisely to reinforce the idea of no fate. Most people live in the illusion of a happy ending, believing everything can work out. But there are other realities happening, in silence, beyond the reach of common choices. Terminator 2D uses its ending system to symbolize the parallel realities of time, and Sarah becomes the epicenter of this fragmentation. When I watched the scene for the first time, I found myself paralyzed. The game didn't just subvert my expectations, it made me feel the weight of the price of freedom. Sarah overcame her fear, but lost everything that made her human. And the cruelest part is that the game doesn't blame you, it just shows you the result. No fate stops being a belief and becomes a bitter realization. Perhaps free will brings no salvation, only different forms of tragedy. The Easter egg of Arnie's shorts in the biker bar is one of those hidden gems that only Terminator 2D No Fate would have the guts to include, and it says a lot about the game's mysteriously ironic tone. This detail only appears in Judgment Day mode, the highest difficulty, which is why it goes unnoticed by most players. But when the T-800 enters that famous bar, instead of the classic naked and imposing introduction, he appears wearing neon Zubaz shorts. Yes, the same ones Schwarzenegger wore on the set of the original movie. At first, it seems like just a joke, but the more you think about it, the more you realize how much the game is playing with the idea of the indestructible Terminator myth. Seeing that iconic moment transformed completely changes the perception of the scene. That introduction, which in cinema was a symbol of power and threat, here turns into something almost human, almost vulnerable. Suddenly, the Terminator isn't an unreachable figure. He's a behind-the-scenes actor, someone who exists outside the fiction. It's a metalinguistic detail, almost as if the game is winking at you and saying, "Hey, remember all of this is a construction?" This is genius because No Fate has always played with the line between destiny and control, and now it extends that idea to the movie's production itself. The fact that this Easter egg is locked behind the highest difficulty also carries a layer of meaning. It's almost like a reward for those who truly face fate. While most players just want to survive Skynet, those who go deep and master the game get a lighthearted moment, a break in the tension, and, paradoxically, a reminder that the Terminator also has a past that is more real than epic. It's humor turned into context, meta turned into humanity, and of course, it's a loving nod to the hardcore fans of the universe. This visual gag also ends up humanizing the T-800 in an unexpected way. In the movies, he is always seen as a machine in search of humanity. Here, the game finds a way to make him human through a simple costume error, but an intentional one. He appears as if he chose to wear the shorts, assuming a touch of absurd individuality within a story about programming and destiny. It's comedic, but deeply symbolic. It's the first moment the Terminator seems to choose something the scripts never allowed him. The most interesting thing is how this Easter egg creates a meta layer of production within the game, which is very rare in movie adaptations. When you realize the look comes straight from real behind-the-scenes footage, the game starts to function on two levels, as a narrative and as a commentary on its own creation. It transforms the original scene of domination and fear into an inside joke about pop culture, filming, and the weight of the Terminator legacy. It's the kind of detail that, instead of breaking immersion, expands it, because it reminds you that even the myth was born from something human and imperfect. The hidden continues are one of the game's best-kept secrets, and for me, one of the coolest examples of how the development team tied gameplay and narrative together in a nearly symbiotic way. At first glance, these T-800 skulls seem like mere collectibles, a classic arcade feature for those who enjoy exploring every pixel. But the truth is, they tell a silent story, one that hides between the lines of the ruins, waiting for the curious player to dig, literally, for answers. These logos are scattered in very specific points of the levels, such as behind destructible planks in level 1, or on a hidden wall right at the beginning of level 2. The tutorial only mentions the first one very vaguely, so most players pass it by thinking it's just an isolated extra life. But as you discover more and more skulls, you notice a pattern. Each one is positioned in locations that show signs of a previous battle, as if a Terminator had fallen there before you. They're like echoes of past units, previous versions sent in different temporal cycles that failed. In other words, it's lore disguised as a power-up. And when the game rewards you, it doesn't do so just with mechanical advantages. Finding all 12 Skynet continues unlocks secret cheat menus, hidden ranks, and, most intriguingly, background visions of lore displayed in the futuristic settings. These are almost subliminal images of factories, tunnels, and experiments. And although there is no dialogue explaining anything, the subtext is easy to grasp. The player is literally accessing the remains of the previous cycle, as if breaking the wall of time along with the walls of the levels. What was a simple extra becomes a dive into the underworld of Skynet. Playing through these sections, the feeling is one of discovery, but also of being haunted. Every skull picked up is a reminder that the T-800 you control might not be the first, and perhaps not the last. This repetition of units, reinforced by the secret visuals, sustains that central theme of No Fate, the inescapable loop of creation and destruction. Even the bonuses follow this pattern, as they give more lives to the player, suggesting that each retry is, in fact, another Terminator being sent. The simple act of continuing, which is mechanical in a common arcade game, is transformed here into a reflection on what it means to live again. Another thing that struck me is how these collectibles expand the universe beyond the film without needing long cutscenes or expository dialogue. The background speaks for itself. Factories glowing in the distance, abandoned tanks, encrypted files quickly flashing on the screen. The game unites gameplay and lore in small details, trusting that the attentive player will piece it all together. It's almost as if the developers left intentional clues for those who truly believe that everything has a reason within the Terminator cycle. Discovering these logos is more than hunting for bonuses. It's uncovering technological ghosts from past timelines. And when you collect them all, you feel like you've truly crossed the boundary between the game and the world. It's the kind of reward that doesn't scream, "Look at the secret," but instead rewards those who look closely, those who listen to the silence between the gunshots. Terminator 2D No Fate makes exploration a narrative act, and the Skynet Continues are proof of that. Every skull you find is one more fragment of time, and one more reminder that the past is still watching you.